Hello there and welcome to week 1 of our EFAI online video tutorial sessions. These video tutorial sessions will replace the online lectures that you would have missed for our EFAI module. This particular lesson that we will be conducting today will cover the week of the 30th of March to the 3rd of April, which is this week. I understand that many of us, particularly if you are like me, are really struggling with what day of the week it is and what date it is. So for those of us who need a little bit of a shake-up, it is the 30th of March today. For those of you who are wondering who I am, my name is Trevelyn DeVette and I am the module coordinator for our English First Additional Language module, and I am the Musgrave lecturer. My intention in creating these video tutorials is to provide a space for you to engage with content and for me to provide specific guidelines around our expectations as lecturers. I understand that these are very difficult times and many of us, myself included, are adjusting to the surreal new reality that we found ourselves in. And I think it's important for you to take your time. It's going to take a while to adjust to these sessions and working more independently. I think it's very difficult and we have to be quite strict with our time frames. So please, I would encourage you to work as you would have worked for the online sessions. So in the particular time frame, maybe this module might be a module where you work a little bit of an earlier time frame because obviously our lecture times are quite late, but work according to that and devote as many hours in your work week, your now independent work week, as you would have in your lecture work week. As much as we are all adjusting to this new independent form of learning, please note that we are here to support you, and please use ECI as your first port of call. Please notify any issues that you may have to either myself, the module coordinator, or any of your lecturers. And please use all the online activities as a space to engage with one another. As much as we've temporarily lost the opportunity to engage in person in a lecture space, and I know for me that is a particularly enjoyable space to be in, but for now please try to transfer that energy, transfer what you would have liked to share in lecture spaces to the online spaces that are available. I really want to try to replace this and replicate this on our ECI page. So please make sure that you complete all activities, you participate in online forums and online discussions. This is really your space to engage with one another and to bridge the very real divide that we now have between each one of us. For those of you who didn't receive my message on ECI, please note that our EFAI test, the one that was upcoming for, I think it was the 18th of April, is now going to be converted to an online assessment task. We are not quite sure how this will be handled yet, but we are already putting things into place around this. Our vision for this assessment is that we are going to take 2 questions that we had already created in the test, and we are going to be posting them on ECI, and you will be required to complete the assessment task within 24 hours. I will be sending further details around this closer to the time, but just so you know, it will be after the 17th of April. And today's lecture will best prepare you for the requirements of this assessment task. What we are intending to do for this assessment task is to take 2 of the mini essay or paragraph type questions from the test and to transfer them on an online platform. This means that you'll be able to type out your assessment and you'll be able to submit it on a Turnitin platform. Please be mindful that this is an independent activity and we can check to see if people are copying from one another on Turnitin. You will be severely penalized for copying one another's work. This is independent activity, so please treat it as an independent task and please treat it as you would have for a standard normal test or a normal standard assignment. So to best prepare for this assessment task, I thought it would be a very good idea to go through our assessment standards and learning outcomes. I have copied these straight from our study letter, so you can find greater details around this from your study letter, but for now I thought it would just be useful to copy and paste it. So our main learning outcomes for Unit 1 is obviously debating the merits of mother tongue education versus straight for English or first for English education. It's very important for you to look at the advantages and disadvantages of these types of teaching and the realities of them within the South African environment. It's very important for you at this point to start looking at what are the advantages and disadvantages of each one of these forms of teaching, additional language teaching, and then it's very important for you to think, do you believe the advantages outweigh the disadvantages or vice versa? There is no one correct response. It's very important for you to be able to justify and substantiate your response. So it's very important for you to look at your articles that we have already covered in class and we have gone through together. Also, all your online resources. If you want to do your own research, that's fantastic as well. And also for you to think of your personal experiences as an additional language learner. How was English taught to you? How was your additional language taught to you? And do you believe that this was a successful teaching method or not? So it's very important for you to also reflect on your personal experiences of this. And then finally, the assessment standards is obviously very important for you to critically discuss the role of mother tongue in education in South Africa through a class debate. So obviously we are focusing on the South African environment, and it's very important for you to look at the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, hopefully by the end of the session, and it's actually going to be a requirement or assessment for this particular session, I really want you to come to this consensus or agreement around which approach do you believe has the greater advantage for the average South African child. Before we dive into the independent work that will be required of you for this particular learning session, I thought it would be a really good idea to orientate you with some of the learning outcomes of this particular session that aligns directly with the learning outcomes of Unit 1 of the module. Whenever you see this word learning outcomes, essentially what this refers to as a skill that you should develop by the conclusion of a particular lecture or learning session. So the first and most important learning outcome that we have for Unit 1 is that you should be able to critically explore both the mother tongue and straight for English teaching approaches. Whenever you see this word critically explore, you should be able to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of a particular theory or idea. The focus here, however, is on 2 different teaching approaches, and the mother tongue teaching and straight for English teaching, I'm sure we all know by now, are 2 different opposing ideas around how an additional language should be taught. Each approach has a pro and a con. Each approach has advantages and disadvantages or shortcomings. So it's very important for you to look at this argument holistically. Look at both sides of the argument. Before you can come to a conclusion around which you believe is the better approach, it's very important for you to first consider the advantages and disadvantages, essentially weigh them up and see which one outweighs the other. Secondly, I think it's also very important that you personally reflect on these advantages and disadvantages. I think a lot of the times we treat this information as being very objective, but it's very important for you to consider your subjective experience. So you are all subjected to these different teaching approaches as an additional language learner. You all came from the school environment and you were taught in a specific way. So I want you to think back to your experiences in the classroom. Which teaching approach were you exposed to? And what was your experience of this teaching approach? Do you believe that it met your needs, or do you believe that this teaching approach was unsuccessful, and why? I want you to be very specific about the why. Consider what was it about this approach that did not meet your needs. Be very, very specific. And I think it's very important for you to reflect on your experiences as an additional language learner, because obviously one day you will be an additional language teacher. So it's very important for you to think about what were your experiences, what mistakes did teachers make in teaching you, and how are you then going to take those experiences and channel them into a very positive experience. So you kind of take the mistakes of your past teachers and you make this into constructive skills to create a very engaging classroom space. So very important for you to reflect, what were your experiences? And then very important, I think it's, we can't just have an argument. I think it stands for reason that we have to support and provide evidence to substantiate our opinions and viewpoints. So very important for you to look at the supporting detail and take the supporting detail from the various resources that we have provided you with. Obviously, your course reader will be particularly important here. Look at a lot of the ideas that have already been discussed in that course reader and see how do these ideas and arguments from these different theorists and writers align or match up with what you are thinking. It's also very important for you to consult our ECI page. There are many articles that we have posted online. The reason why we've made all these articles available is to really encourage you to reflect on what is your position within this particular debate. And it is a debate that is constantly raging on. Yes, there might be specific rulings made by the Department of Education, but for you, I want you to think about from your position, where do you stand? And it's important that when you have a particular position that you should be able to support this position with facts and verifiable research, which obviously you can get from your various resources that are available. And then finally, the final learning outcome is that you should take all your responses to the above learning outcomes and you should be able to condense it, to summarize it, and then to be able to structure it into a coherent paragraph. There will be more notes available on how to best construct a paragraph on the ECI page, but for now I want us to start with just reflecting on our arguments before we get into the skills of structuring these arguments into a well-structured paragraph. So this slide provides you an overview of your independent activity, the activity that will be required of you in this particular session. So you are going to be required to analyze and reflect on your position in this particular debate. So the activity is that you need to critically analyze the advantages and disadvantages of the two teaching approaches. So before you dive into the critical analysis, like I've already said, it's very important for you to weigh up the pros and cons. Summarize the key points or key arguments that you already know regarding this particular debate. And this is where step one comes in. So I've provided you guidelines with how to respond to this kind of a very open-ended question. So step one is really just giving you specific pointers about how you would list the advantages and disadvantages. And I think it's quite important to tabulate this because you might see that some advantages and disadvantages link to others. So you get to see a fuller picture. So as the instructions for step 1 says, I would divide a piece of paper, so write out some of these key arguments, or else you can do this on a Word document, depending on what your preference is. Start with this, and then after you have enough pointers down, then you move on to step 2. Step 2 requires you to then go back to the resources available, the articles that are in your course reader and articles that are online, and see how what theorists and academics, what their arguments are, what they have said, how this relates to your key pointers that you've made. So see this information, this step 2, as your supporting detail, which really substantiates your key arguments or key findings. Very important that you provide references and page numbers. So like I've already said, this particular activity will prepare you for the assessment standards for the upcoming online assessment. So very important for you to start treating this as sort of practice material. So see this activity as an activity which will best prepare you for the assignment. So when you do the assignment, you can actually refer back to a lot of these notes that you would have already created. And finally, step 3 is also very important. Reflect on your own personal experiences as an additional language learner. And then consider how this informs your position. How does your experiences, whatever these experiences might be, how does this actually affect your position on this particular debate? So it's very important, make it personally meaningful to you, and then look at what were your experiences, because a lot of the times your experiences can substantiate or support your argument. You are the primary subject, you have had experiences in this, so reflect on these experiences. They are meaningful to this particular debate, and as much as sometimes academics might say one thing, your personal experience might actually be worth more than what academic findings say. So very important that you look at each one of these, the step 1, step 2, step 3, and see how each of the pointers or arguments you've raised relate to one another, or see where they differ. So what you'll see on this slide is that I've modeled the requirements of the activity, and this is particularly step 1. Each one of these pointers that I've made around the advantages and disadvantages, I've structured in a table. I've started with only key core points. I would then likely add onto it, add on more points, look at what the information from the various resources are, what experiences I had, and then add on to this baseline. So I just really wanted to show you how I thought it should be structured. Obviously, you're welcome to do it however you wish to do it, but I just thought I would show you this as a starting point for your step 1 of your analysis question. And for this is your final reflection. I really want you to consider what is your position on the debate and respond to quite a few of these open-ended questions that I have already posed. Please take your time in thinking of your responses, and then please go share your responses on a forum that is titled the Language Debate Online Forum. So please use this forum as a place to build on one another's discussion points. If you disagree with what somebody has said, then pose a counter argument, an argument that goes against what they're saying. And I really want this to be a space for us to engage and discuss, very much like what we would do normally in a face-to-face contact learning lecture. We are now creating a space online for you to respond to. This will obviously not be compulsory, but please, I'd like to encourage you to do this because you can build on one another's responses. Use the spaces that are given to you to engage with one another. I think in these social distancing times, it's very important that we engage with one another. And as much as we're engaging with one another on a social perspective, and we're seeing that is everybody okay, it's very important for us to not neglect our academics, to not neglect our cognitive needs that we have. As much as many of us are adjusting to this new normal, it's very important that we carve out time to complete this. And this is something that will really help you prepare for the assessment task. So I would really encourage you, do the work now, and then you've already got a lot of work generated that you can then draw on for the assessment task. Good luck and use your time wisely.